Leica Radio.
The personalities that matter with Keith Vaz on Talking Points.
Leica Radio.
My special guest in this hour is one of the most powerful voices, if not people, in business in London, the world's financial capital. Rajesh Agrawal was born in rural India in the middle of that subcontinent and started off his working life selling website designs for about 5,000 rupees. It's about 50 quid a month. He crossed the world and came to London with literally only £200 in his pocket in 2001. Like Dick Whittington, London's most famous Lord Mayor, his almost rags to riches story blossomed when he arrived in the capital. He started his entrepreneurial journey by founding Rational FX in 2005 and ZendPay in 2014, both companies aiming to reduce the cost of international transfers, which is always a burden for the migrant community. He became a millionaire. Sadiq Khan chose him 5 years ago as London's Deputy Mayor for Business and reappointed him just a few weeks ago. He joins me this morning from North London. Good morning, Deputy Mayor Rajesh Agrawal.
Good morning, Keith. Thank you very much for having me.
First of all, let me congratulate you on your reappointment by Mayor Sadiq Khan for another term as the Deputy Mayor for Business. Was that expected or was it a surprise?
I'm very delighted and honoured. It's a privilege and honour of my life to be reappointed as the Deputy Mayor of one of the greatest cities in the world. Sadiq and I have worked incredibly hard for the last 5 years and we've still got a lot of work to do. So I'm very delighted that the appointment has been reconfirmed.
Now, this is a long way away from where you grew up in a working class family in India. Do you remember much about your early life?
Yes, I've actually got very vivid memories of my childhood. My mother was a school teacher, teaching girls from underprivileged background. My father was a government worker. And I still remember until the age of 10 or so, my parents, my two siblings and myself, we all lived in a rented one-bedroom place. During the day, that room was our living room, and in the night, we would roll down the mattress, and that would become our bedroom. And so our struggles in the childhood were the struggles of a typical low-income working-class family in India. But despite the financial hardships, it was a very happy childhood. My parents gave us the best they could. They believed that education is the best way out of poverty, so they made sure all of us receive a good education. But most importantly, they taught us the values of hard work, integrity, kindness, aspiration, and giving back to the society.
Now, your first job was very different from the job that you do today and the job that you did when you first came to the UK. Did you enjoy website designing? And has it kind of stayed with you when you look at people's websites, as you must do these days as Deputy Mayor for London for Business? And you think, had a look at this design, actually, I could do much better. Did you enjoy doing that?
I did actually, although I must admit that I was mostly selling website designing than actually designing the websites myself. But it was great fun. I did occasionally design the website myself. And don't forget, this was in year 1999 in India. Most people didn't even know what the internet was. So selling website designing was really a hard job. You had to start by explaining what the internet is, and then the website and so on. But look at India now as the IT powerhouse. But you're absolutely right. I still look at people's website and I've got my view on how it can be improved. Although the technology has moved far along, obviously, in the last 20 years. But yeah, I still sort of look at it very closely.
You made a journey to London at the age of 24. That's slightly older in the sense that it's much more difficult to integrate when you come at that age. You made the decision to leave India, which, as we now know, is booming in industry and commerce. Did you not want to stay there and make your fortune and make your future in India? Why did you come here?
Well, there are now huge opportunities in India. We're not there necessarily when I was actually growing up, but from late 90s onwards, we've seen India absolutely booming. But I was a 24-year-old young man, and I wanted to see the world. I was fascinated about different cultures and countries, but I had never had the opportunity to travel outside India. So when I got the opportunity to come to London, I got on to it straight away. I knew this is the place where I'm going to do really well. But it would give me an opportunity to see the world. And it is right, it did so. So I've traveled around the world in the last so many years that I've been here, and it's been absolute joy.
Now, tell us about that first day. I can remember my first day. It was the 15th of August, 1965, Heathrow Airport, Terminal 3, walking with my two sisters across the bridge to the car park. It was raining, and it's actually not stopped raining since then, apart from a couple of days this week. Do you remember that very first day of your arrival?
Absolutely. I think most immigrants do remember their first day very vivid. And I do too. I remember 30th September 2001 when I landed at Heathrow Airport. Actually, before landing, the plane was slightly early and it didn't have a place to land. So it was just hovering around above London. And it was a very clear day. And it was early in the morning, about 7:30 in the morning. I had a window seat. It was my first time on an airplane. So I made sure I have a window seat so I can see outside. And I looked down and I saw London, and I had this amazing feeling. And when I landed and came to London, I didn't feel like a stranger at all. And that's the great quality of this country and this city, that you don't feel like a stranger, that London welcomed me open arms. And it was, that day is absolutely in my head.
This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Rajesh Agrawal, the Deputy Mayor of London for Business. We're going to come back and continue our talk after the break.
Keith Vaz on Talking Points. Leica.
Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, Rajesh Agrawal. Rajesh, you went into the money transfer business and started Rational FX. You didn't open up a corner shop. You didn't go into retail business. Why did you open that kind of business? Did you have experience in it?
Yes, when I first came to London, I used to work for a small foreign exchange outfit on Holborn. So I was aware of the foreign exchange markets, but I was also aware of how much markup and the spread, as they call it in the FX markets, the banks were charging small businesses. I saw a great opportunity there, because if you're a small business, let's say you're importing from India, you have to make payments in US dollars to your Indian supplier. You normally use your bank. But the exchange rate that the banks offered was what we call as the tourist exchange rates. And I saw there's an opportunity exchange rate that is being offered to these small businesses, and it will help them save money. And that's how Rational FX was born. And I used my tech background to bring more technology to lower the cost of foreign exchange payments.
But this is a very highly competitive market that you went into. You were up against some really big companies, but you managed to succeed. You then founded SendPay in 2014. Was it difficult? The problem is in the financial sector, it's a very acquired taste, isn't it? You've got to know about how these things operate. Though you started by working in exchange, as you say, when you arrived in London, is it very much a learning process? Did you make a lot of mistakes and then change what you did?
It is just like in any business, you learn as you go along. You have to be confident, you have to be optimistic, and if you make a mistake, you try and quickly rectify it, learn from it, and move on. That's a very typical entrepreneur's way. So you're right, it's absolutely a highly competitive market, but we were already making international payments for small businesses by then through Rational FX. And then I looked at people like myself, immigrants who have come to this country, who are saving money and then sending some of that hard-earned money back home to their families, and they are getting ripped off by the exchange companies and also banks and so on. So I thought, why not use the payment infrastructure that I have for business customers and bring it down to the retail customers and offer them at an extremely competitive price. And that's how ZenPay was born.
The financial landscape now, of course, is very, very different to what it was when you first came here. Nobody could have foreseen the arrival of cryptocurrencies, including bitcoins. Has this transformed the future of financial services? Do you think that things will never be the same again? When you came here, cash was what was being used to buy things. Now it's all done by card. You can't even go to Starbucks and not have a card ready. And now you've got cryptocurrencies and bitcoins. Where will it all end, do you think? Or do you just think it's just going to move on and on and on to new things?
Well, technology is always moving on and on. And technology has touched all aspects of our lives. And of course, financial services, fintech, as they call it, the financial technology is changing, and how much it has changed from sort of debit card and credit cards to virtual debit cards and credit cards and contactless payments and you mentioned Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and blockchain. The innovation is happening at a phenomenal pace, but all this innovation is going to, in the end, benefit the customers. And that's the most important thing. No company can achieve success unless they're providing a good value and customers like them. So I'm a big technology enthusiast, and I believe technology is a force for good, and it can improve the quality of lives, and it will just continue to keep make a life better and improve. I mean, we just have to look at COVID, how quickly the vaccine has been developed.
We'll come on to that slightly later. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to the Deputy Mayor for London for Business, Rajesh Agrawal. When we return, I'll be talking about his very important role as the Deputy Mayor. Join us after the break.
Talking Points with Keith Vaz, celebrating diversity. Leica, London.
Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to the Deputy Mayor for London for Business, Rajesh Agrawal. Rajesh, were you surprised when Sadiq Khan offered you the top job for business in his top team in London? And when he gave you the job, did he set you any benchmarks?
Well, I was interestingly appointed 6 days after the Brexit referendum. There was a great deal of economic and political uncertainty. Businesses were anxious. Pound sterling just plummeted. PM had just resigned. So Sadiq called me in his office and basically tasked me with protecting jobs and growth in London. It was a surprise. I knew it is going to be a big challenge, but this city and this country has given me so much, and this was my opportunity to give back. So I gladly straight away accepted it, and I'm so delighted that despite all the upheavals caused by Brexit and the challenges are still ongoing, etc., we have still made good progress, or at least managed to protect some of the most important sectors from Brexit in London. And I totally believe in Britain and London, and it has overcome huge challenges in the past, and it will do so again. And Brexit is one of those challenges. But, despite Brexit, I know we're going to thrive.
But it's a big leap, isn't it? There you were. From nothing, you built your own company, which was highly successful, hugely respected as a business person. Now you are making the switch over to basically represent the mayor as far as business is concerned. Instead of asking politicians, people would come to you and ask you for things. Was it a big cultural shift? Because it must be quite difficult when you've got all these businesses in London turning around and demanding more.
It is. I mean, the way I describe it is I was a carpenter before when I was building furniture, when I built my business, and I'm like a gardener now, helping and creating environment for other businesses to thrive. But it's very, very a big change culturally when you're an entrepreneur, you're running your own business, you are taking decisions, and you're very quick. Whereas when you are in the government, there is red tape, bureaucracy. I mean, in City Hall, it's less than it would be in central government significantly. But still, it exists, and there are a huge number of stakeholders and so on. But it is very satisfying, I must say, to help other business. And that is what really excites me, to help other entrepreneurs and businesses.
Describe for me your perfect day, because it's such a huge job. You've got so much to do. You get on that tube in the morning, you get down to City Hall. How would your day pan out? What kinds of things would you do?
Well, I would meet my team on a very regular basis. I would meet a number of businesses, make sure all different sectors across London, and London's economy is highly diverse. We're going to make sure that all different sectors of London are able to reach out, and we don't leave any particular sector underrepresented. And also economic fairness and equality and diversity is a big part of the job. So we've got to make sure that we are also talking to employees, not just employers and businesses, because we want to make London not just the best city in the world to start and grow a business, but also the best city in the world in which to work in. So the job entails talking to different people throughout the day, and then get down and work on the policy. Another part of the job which I love dearly is the drum for London around the world. I'm like a traveling salesman for London, and to bring foreign investment from around the world into London. I'm so delighted that from India we've brought a huge amount of foreign investment now, and India is the second largest investor in London now.
And if you look at the last 5 years, because of course you've both got an extension because because of COVID. What would you say your legacies have been? Obviously, there's more to do because you've been reappointed. But if you look at the first 5 years, the chart of success, what are the ones that you'd like to highlight? Clearly, the figures on investment into London are important. But is there anything particular you think you and the Mayor would say, we did that for business?
Well, I think last 5 years for businesses have been hugely challenging. As an entrepreneur, I know it from my personal experience. It takes blood, sweat and tears to build a business. And to see many businesses suffer in the way they have in the last 5 years with Brexit and COVID, many of them have gone under with no fault of their own. It's heartbreaking to see that. So when I look back last 5 years, I know in my heart that we've done everything we can to support those businesses and make sure that their voice is heard in any big government decisions, whether it's on sort of Brexit negotiations for different sectors, for example, on sort of COVID business support and relief and so on. So, and then opening during my period in the last 5 years, we made sure the foreign investment from around the world continues to flow into London. We've opened offices in 12 cities around the world, including 2 in India. And, as a direct result of which, the foreign investment coming into London from India has nearly doubled in the last 5 years.
This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. After talking to Rajesh Agrawal, the Deputy Mayor of London for Business, and after the 10 o'clock news, I'll be talking about head and neck issues in our weekend checkup with Miss Safina Ali, a consultant ENT surgeon. Then to Panshi Gulati, who is the founder of Rain On Me, an organisation that helps people with anxiety. And finally to Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia, where I'll be talking to Panchanathan Kamalnathan, the chairman of the Labuan Port Authority, about the COVID situation in Malaysia. Join me shortly.
The personalities that matter with Keith Vaz on Talking Points.
Leica Radio.
Welcome back. This is Keith Vaz on Leica Radio. I'm talking to Rajesh Agrawal, the Deputy Mayor for London for Business. Rajesh, London's businesses are very concerned about the congestion charge generally, but also the suggestions that it might be extended. I was talking to one business owner and he said that every time one of his potential customers come into London, they have to pay the congestion charge. What is the Mayor's and your answer to that? Because on the one hand, he has to raise the money. He's got Heidi Alexander telling him this has to be done, reducing the number of cars going in. On the other hand, there you are saying business is very upset. What's the answer to this very difficult conundrum?
Well, when the COVID pandemic actually started, the Mayor very promptly waived the congestion charge. And during the pandemic, we have seen the passenger numbers on the tube and buses drop record low levels. In fact, at the lowest point, it was only 5% of the normal. So last time we had such few numbers on the tube was in 19th century. And 62% of all the TfL income come from fares. That just massively dropped. Congestion charge, it's important to tell all your listeners that there's no plan to extend the congestion charging zones. In fact, the Mayor has strongly resisted the calls from the central government to actually extend the congestion charging zone. But look, at the end of the day, we all want clean air. We all want less congestion in London, and that can only be achieved if more people walk, cycle, make use of the public transport. And that's why it's important that the government keeps on investing in the infrastructure in London, because infrastructure is not stationary. You have to constantly invest in it. And the more you invest, it will help London recover, and it will help the country recover from the economic crisis that we are in.
But it's been a tough few years, as you've said, and a tough 2 years in particular. The pandemic has destroyed many small businesses and a great deal of commercial activity. You can feel this not just going on the tube even now, but also when some of the restrictions were lifted. London is not what it used to be. Businesses have been bludgeoned. Is there a pathway out of this? Is this something that London can do on its own, or do you really need the government to give you a huge amount of money to help you?
Well, I completely have full faith in London and Londoners. London has seen huge challenges in the past, but it's the creative energy, the entrepreneurial zeal of Londoners that will make London thrive again. I have to be clear in terms of the challenges that London is facing in terms of the reduced footfall in central London, for example. And that's why we have put a £6 million fund together to increase the footfall and spending in central London. We have tourism, hospitality and retail is a big part of London's economy. Tourism and hospitality together are responsible for 1 in 7 jobs in London. And if you include retail, it's 1 in 5 jobs in London. Now, London has lost 11 billion pounds in tourism spending just last year. But some of this will come back. I mean, international tourism will take much longer to come back. Domestic tourism will come back quicker, and we are running a campaign to bring more people into central London. And you've got the commuters. As more people start working from home, hopefully some of them will return into London, even if it is 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And all of this has got a knock-on impact on our city. But we should see this as an opportunity to rebuild and reimagine the kind of city we want, which is fairer, greener and healthier.
You arrived exactly 20 years ago this year. When you go up to the top of the Shard, as you might go from time to time, in fact, I'd be surprised if you weren't invited as the Deputy Mayor to go to the top of the Shard, and you kind of look down at that fantastic landscape of the second greatest city in the world, after Leicester, of course. You see your business domain. Can you actually believe what you have achieved over those last 20 years?
Well, I believe that anybody can achieve anything in London if they put their mind to it. When I look at London, I still get the same feeling of awe that I did on 30th September 2001 when I was looking from the airplane as it was hovering above London. It's exactly the same feeling. It still gives me goosebumps. London is a city of opportunities. It's a city where you can be what you want to be. You can achieve what you want to achieve. And when I look back, my story is not unique. My story is a London story. My story is an Asian story. I mean, look at the Asian community, how many of them came as refugees, but they've built successful businesses over a period of time. So whilst I look back at my own past and feel proud about it, it's not a unique story, and I feel proud about the whole community that has achieved so much.
Rajesh Agrawal, Deputy Mayor of London, it has been an absolute pleasure talking to you. We've known each other for a number of years, but this interview has been so revealing and so many new things that I've discovered about you. Always ask our special guests to choose a song that is important to them and to dedicate it to someone who is important to them as well. Which song would you like to choose, and who would you like to dedicate it to?
The Bollywood is full of amazing songs, and my mother had a major influence on my life. So I would like to dedicate a song to my mother. And one of the best songs on mother was in a movie called Tare Zameen Pe. There's a song called Meri Maa, and I absolutely love that song, and I'd like to dedicate it to my mother, who is still both my parents live in India. So Tare Zameen Pe, Meri Maa.
Well, Mum of Rajesh Agrawal, I hope you're listening to the programme. Rajesh, thank you for joining us today. It's been wonderful talking to you, and we hope to talk to you again very soon.
Thank you, Keith, and best wishes to all the listeners of Leica Radio.
Now let's hear Rajesh Agrawal's song.
मैं कभी बतलाता नहीं, पर अंधेरे से डरता हूँ मैं माँ। यूं तो मैं दिखलाता नहीं, तेरी परवाह करता हूँ मैं माँ। तुझे सब है पता है ना माँ, तुझे सब है पता मेरी माँ। भीड़ में यूं न छोड़ो मुझे, घर लौट के भी आना पाऊँ माँ। भेजना इतना दूर मुझको तो, याद भी तुझको आना पाऊँ माँ। क्या इतना बुरा हूँ मैं माँ, क्या इतना बुरा मेरी माँ। कहता नहीं, पर मैं सहम जाता हूँ माँ। चेहरे पे आने देता नहीं, दिल ही दिल में घबराता हूँ माँ। तुझे सब है पता है ना माँ, तुझे सब है पता मेरी माँ। मैं कभी बतलाता नहीं, पर अंधेरे से डरता हूँ मैं माँ। यूं तो मैं दिखलाता नहीं, तेरी परवाह करता हूँ मैं माँ। तुझे सब है पता है ना माँ, तुझे सब है पता मेरी माँ।
Like a Radio.